What's up, guys? We got this '03 GMC Sierra in here. It's got a pretty leaky oil pan gasket, so we've got a new one here from Pro. So we're going to show you guys what it takes to get that took apart. It should be pretty simple. I think there's like one or two little brackets we got to drop, and then maybe, would you say the power steering rack? The steering rack will drop out, which is a cake, and then take the pan off, and we'll show you what it takes. If it's a factory one, it's riveted to the pan, and we'll show you what you got to do to get those rivets off and then put the new one on and get it slapped back together. So stay tuned. All right, guys, so the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna drain the oil here. If that's not obvious, then I really think that you need to spend an extra 10 minutes Googling how to do this if you didn't think that taking the oil out is obvious. Completely missed. Alright, that's alright. She's a shooter. Alright, so we're gonna get this oil drained and then start working on getting this bracket down. Do we really have to take the steering rack down?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, it's in the way. I'm gonna try to move this camera around to where you guys can see what we're doing, but I'm gonna cut it off for now. We're gonna get this oil drained, and then, like I said, we'll start working on getting those mounts and the steering rack out. The steering rack's right on the other side of this, but I'll move the camera to show you when we get to it. Alright, we're gonna start by getting these brackets off. These longer ones have a bolt on each end. There's 4 of those. They're 14 millimeter. And then you're gonna have these 2 right here. It's a long bolt nut on both sides. Those are 18, right? Yeah. Yeah, 18. So you'll need a wrench and a socket for that. And then we'll drop this out of the way, and then we'll move on to the steering rack. If you got a Dugga machine, this would be the time to use it. Let's get that top one.
Wait, another one.
So we missed a couple. We actually forgot that there's 2 more bolts.
No, not an 18.
Where he's at, and then on the other side, not an 18, smaller?
Probably 16. Or actually, let's do a 15.
So it's a 15. There's 2 of them. We can use the impact if it's kind of long. Winded. Oh, yeah, I saw it sag. Alright, so after you get those 2 15s, it's moving.
Yeah. There we go.
Let me have it this way. Or there you go.
Woo!
Alright, so right now we're taking off, there's a little plastic bracket on the front of the motor on the front side of the pan. that holds some wiring in place. So we're taking that loose so we can get that bracket out of the way to get to the front few oil pan bolts. And then after that, we'll go ahead and take these two big bolts out for the steering rack, which is a 24 millimeter on both ends. So if you have a 24 millimeter wrench and socket, you're good to go. If not, we had a socket, but we're gonna use good old adjustable boy to get the other side. All right, so we got the steering rack bolts out. All we did is just kind of slid them forward. We just took the nut off the back of them and slid them up, and the rack slides right off. And it sags a pretty good amount. I mean, it came down about, what, probably 4 or 5 inches right there. So that should be just enough to get us where we need to be. So we're taking the oil pan bolts out, and then the only thing other than that we have to do besides the oil pan bolts, which are all 10 millimeter, is there's the bottom two transmission bell housing bolts. We'll have to take those bottom two out, and then we'll be good to go. We'll drop the pan and get to it. All right, so now we're getting the transmission bolts. It's just these bottom two, the one he's on right now, and then this one right here. We already got all the pan bolts out. And then we unclip the, I think that, what is that, the oil level sensor?
Pressure.
Pressure. Got that unclipped. And then there was another bracket right up here somewhere that he undid. It was pretty easy to get out of the way. Other than that, you already got all the front ones, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, so it should drop right after this.
Yeah, we might have to pry it a little bit. There's some price bundle on that.
Alright, so we got the oil pan out. It is a stock one because these rivets are still here. All you have to do to replace them is just drill those rivets out, and then you can take this old one out, wipe it down, put the new one on, and then you're good to go. Alright, so we got the surface of the engine cleaned up pretty good. We put a little bit of silicone. I can't get my camera straight, but we put a little extra silicone up here where the rear main seal cover is. We suggest doing that. You don't have to, but the way that the rear main cover hangs down and mates to the back of the the pan, it's kind of a leak prone situation. So if you only want to do this one time, we suggest globbing some RTV up in that top end where it mates with the pan and the back rear main cover, and you should be fine. So we're gonna get this pan stuck back on here and started and get her slapped back together. Alright, so we already got our pan back on, bolted down, torqued down. We got the rack and pinion back in. The torque spec on all the pan bolts is, was it 18?
18.
Yeah, 18 foot-pounds on all of the oil pan bolts except for the back two, which are much longer. All the oil pan bolts are the same length except for these back two are longer, so that's how you know. These go to 106 inch-pounds, and if you don't have an inch-pound torque wrench like us, we did the math and that was pretty close to about 8 foot-pounds, so that's what you do on these back ones. Then we put the back two tranny bolts back in. We think we got everything back in. We got that clipped in. We got the cooler line bracket is back on. The harness bracket up front on the front of the pan's back on. Now we're going to put this cross member back in here, and that should wrap it up. And we'll fire it up and forget to put oil in it and throw a rod through the block and realize that our pan gasket is good, but the hole in the pan is not. Unfortunately, we found out that while my creeper tested negative for coronavirus, it is positive for ringworm. Guess I'll just have to throw it away. But other than that, we got everything all buttoned up. Got the braces back on. Pan gasket is replaced.
Yeah.
The main things to remember when you're putting all this back together, make sure you didn't forget nothing, is your oil pressure connector right here. Make sure you get that snapped on good. There's a bracket for the tranny cooler lines. Make sure you get that back in. And then lastly, the plastic bracket on the front for the harness that comes down and around the front of the block. Make sure you get that bolted back in. After that, all your oil pan bolts, your 2 tranny bolts. When you put this cross member back in, you've got 2 bolts here that are 15, and then these 2 bolts on each side. Get those in, get these brackets bolted back in, and then put some oil back in it and fire it up, and your leak will be gone. Hopefully. Appreciate y'all for watching. Don't say hopefully, it will be gone. See ya.